So, good evening, all of you. Before we start, any query? So today we will be discussing important topic, that is exchange rate. So any query or shall I continue? So this is exchange rate, and exchange rate basically for a common man. If you are going through the newspapers, you will be hearing that $1 is equals to 74 rupees, 75 rupees. So this is basically the exchange rate. That means the transaction value of your currency with any other currency. Okay, prior to this discussing this exchange rate, have you gone through the news regarding the GDP, recent news regarding GDP? Let me discuss that first. That is also important part. Have you gone through the news regarding GDP? It was in good growth. Okay. What do you mean by good growth? Increased to 20.1. So it's okay that the GDP growth rate is 20.1. So there was certain compared to, okay, Bhaskar has brought in the, actually I was willing to ask this. So what is actually the opposition, or most prominently, I think it was I think a write-up of P. Chidambaram. He's questioning, he's saying that this GDP growth rate, or this it's not heartening for the economy. First, secondly, they are saying that it is on account of the lower base. Right? What is this lower base, and why it is not? Though it's good that we have achieved 20.1 plus, but why still it is worrying for the economy? Bhaskar, you have, to an extent, you have understood. You are on the right track. Anybody will tell me that what is the idea of that low base? And secondly, why, though it's 20.1, but still it is not uh, heartening, or still it's worrying for the economy? Because GDP 2020 is in itself been the worst year for GDP growth. Okay. What do you mean by low base rate? Low base effect. What do you mean by low base effect? Okay, tell me, when we are calculating GDP, then it is year on year basis or quarter on quarter basis in the Indian context? Is it year on year basis or quarter on quarter basis?
Year on year basis.
Very good. Very good. That means you people are clear with the concept. So low base means that we are comparing this quarter to the previous year's quarter, and last time quarter was having the absolute GDP figures very low on account of the pandemic. First thing. Secondly, my question was having base year as the lowest GDP year. Okay. My second question was that why the economists are saying that still it is worrisome for the economy, despite that we have 20.1 growth. The reason is that if you talk in the absolute terms, right, in absolute terms, still the GDP in absolute terms, it has not reached the pre-pandemic level, right? That is the basic reason. So now, starting this exchange rate. So exchange rate is basically the rate, the transaction rate at which you are exchanging your currency with the foreign currency. So for example, if you are going to have euro, then you might be giving 80 rupees for that. And for $1, you might be giving 75 rupees. That means that the exchange rate of 1 euro to rupees is 80 rupees and $1 to rupees 75 rupees. That is exchange rate. Now, very popular nowadays, you will be listening in the news that foreign exchange reserves, it has crossed 600 billions. There was a news related to some foreign exchange reserves that IMF has increased the reserve position. There was a news related to the reserve position of India with respect to IMF. Okay, go through it, Google it, and go through it. This news is recent news. Um, I think within fortnight. So forex reserve is basically nothing but these are the assets held as reserve by a central bank in foreign currencies. And this currency, the foreign currencies are basically those currencies which are in which the country is having trade, right? Because the country will be having those currencies which will be used or which are in demand in case of trade. So foreign currencies which are kept as reserve by the government of India are those foreign currencies which are with the countries with which the country is trading. Right? So this can include bonds, treasury bills, and other government securities. Like I was telling you, the Chinese government has invested in lot of treasury bills and bonds of the US. Similarly, the governments across the world are investing in the bonds. Foreign currency means they can also invest in the bonds of other countries. So it must be noted that most of the foreign exchange reserves are held in US dollars. I already explained that it is the most reliable, most stable foreign currency. Then comes gold reserves, explained. Then comes special drawing rights. See, special drawing rights that we'll discuss in WTO, but now you can understand it that it is a paper gold. It is said to be the paper gold, and it is basically not any currency sort of thing. It's nothing like any like dollar, like rupee, right? It's these are basically the claims. They are only debited and credited in the accounts, right? There's nothing like any physical entity. This is not sort of physical entity, rather they are only debited and credited into the accounts and said to the paper gold. Then reserve position with the IMF. Reserve position with the IMF means that there are certain voting rights in the IMF. The countries are having certain voting rights, and based upon these voting rights, the IMF provides certain amount of reserve position, and this reserve position is having the monetary value, and it is in terms of uh, either a basket of currency or SDR, right? And recently IMF has revised the reserve position of the countries, and it has allocated more reserve positions to countries, right? That's what I was talking about. Google it. Recently, the reserve position of India has also increased, right? It has increased. I think it's around more than $20 billion, right? So go through it and Google it. Google this news. Objectives of holding forex reserves. When I was discussing monetary policy, I discussed about that um, trilemma of RBI. So having the forex reserves is very critical for the RBI to maintain a balance between inflation, exchange rate, and growth. Right now, primarily it is inflation targeting for the RBI, but still, It has to, if there's eventuality in the economy, then finally it has to intervene. So from RBI perspective, from the monetary policy perspective, RBI has to maintain it, right? Maintain the exchange rate, and this forex reserve gives a confidence. So if you can recall that when we were discussing market stabilization scheme, right? When I discuss a story with you of the government in Atal Bihari Vajpayee times, so I said that this scheme was launched, right? I think it was 2004, right? So market stabilization scheme was nothing but it was an attempt to ensure stabilization in the economy, right? So there might be position. This issue arises because of excess inflow, right? But there can be a situation when we are not having enough forex reserves, as happened in 1991. So to ensure to avoid any such eventuality that happened, like that happened in 1991, the government's this forex reserve supports the monetary authorities. Then if we talk about from the government perspective, it is basically supporting the government to avoid any crisis times. For example, if your current account deficit is increasing, at that time, the government should have enough forex reserves. If the government is having proper forex reserve, then it will be feel confident, right? If CAD is there and you are not having proper forex reserves, then it can result into 1991 like situation, right? So it can affect the fiscal policies, right? So this is how the forex reserves gives a confidence to the central monetary authority as well as the government of India. Significance of rising forex reserves, right? This is in the Indian context. Comfortable position for the government, already explained. Managing crisis, already explained. What is balance of payment? Anybody? What is balance of payment? Indirect taxes. Very good, Bhaskar. We have the capacity. Srikanth has it. Srikanth, I'll come back to you on this. I think this was related to GDP. I just saw this. Right. So BOP is telling you this. It is basically a statement of transaction over a year with countries abroad. Right. So if we talk about that means the forex reserve supports the government. It provides a cushion in the event of a BOP crisis. Then third is it helps to appreciation of the rupee. That means it is again about if dollar is less, dollar less, that means dollar will appreciate. While if rupee is less, it's a relative concept. It's a relative concept because it's not like that rupee is more or less at this time, but the idea is that dollar is more at this time. You are having oversupply of dollar. When you are having oversupply of dollar, then relatively the rupee becomes less. When rupee is less, then will it appreciate or depreciate? Simple logic. It's a simple logic, right? Rupee will appreciate when relatively the availability of the dollar is high. right? So this is very common sense. Then comes confidence in the market, simply because when the foreign people are investing in your country, when the foreign investors are investing in the country, then simply means your market is doing good. And this is the confidence in the market of the foreign investor that brings boost to the markets. Now this is all about, we'll understand that how these exchange rate works, right? What is the difference between different type of regimes, and from UPSC point of view, UPSC can ask you about the forex reserves. They can ask you which type of regimes are, direct questions are coming on this, and many times they can ask you some analytical sort of thing, but they are not tricky, right? If you are clear with the concept, then you can crack those questions, so nothing to worry about. Exchange rate, right? It is said to be forex rate, foreign exchange rate, and exchange rate. It is basically the rate at which one currency will be exchanged for other. So in the example I took, a euro exchange rate of the euro was 85 rupees, 80 rupees, and exchange rate of a dollar was 75 rupees. So it is also regarded as the value of one country's currency in terms of another currency. Exchange rate regime means, now you will be eager to know that how it is like that one day the rupee to dollar is 74, on the second day it is 74.5, another day it becomes 75, and another day it might become 73.5. So how is it varying, right? Then you can also be concerned about that when we, in 1991, the IMF asked India to devalue the currency, right? I told you that at that time, the India was asked by the IMF that to depreciate the currency. So devalue the currency, exact word, devalue the currency. So what is this depreciation? What is this devaluation? And how things are taking place in the present world, right? So with reference to exchange rates regime, we will say it the exchange rate regime, right? How exchange rates are being defined or being decided, right? So there are three type of regimes. There are three type of economic system. Regime is nothing but the economic system, how this exchange rate is being defined in an economy. So first is floating, right? Floating. That means the exchange rates are changing, right? They are floating with respect to demand and supply. Simple. Demand and supply means market. And fixed exchange rate means that it is not subjected to market, right? But it is subjected to the instructions of the government's intervention, direct government intervention. So if we move ahead, so an exchange rate regime is the way an authority manages. Authority here means the government or government agency, that is RBI, manages its currency in relation to other currencies and the foreign exchange market. It is closely related to the monetary policy, and the two are generally dependent on many of the same factors. Floating exchange rate. A currency's value, that is the value of rupee. Here we are referring to the Indian exchange market, is allowed to fluctuate. Fluctuate means that started from 75 and 74.5, 74, and then 75.5. This is fluctuating in response to foreign exchange market mechanisms. That means what is deciding this rate is market mechanism. That means here, if it is reducing, if the value of this is becoming 74.5, then tell me whether rupee is strengthening or not strengthening. If the value is $1, initially in the case one, this is 75 rupees, $1 you will get in 75 rupees. In second case, you will get a dollar in 74.5 rupees. Now tell me that in this 74.5 case, whether the rupee is strengthening or appreciating or what, or getting weaker. Rupee depreciate. Okay. Bhaskar, why is it depreciating? Why is it depreciating? Bhaskar, why you are saying that rupee will depreciate? See, in case of 75, it means that you are paying 75 rupees to purchase a dollar in the first case. In the second case, you are paying only 74.5 rupees. That is, you are paying 50 paisa less in the second case. That means you are paying less. That means your rupee is strengthened. It has appreciated, right? So strengthened, right? Weakening is basically when you are paying more rupee, right? If you are paying more rupee, if you say in terms of dollar, that what is the status of dollar in second case 75 to 74.5, that means dollar has weakened, because initially you were paying 75 rupees to purchase a dollar. Now you are paying less to purchase a dollar, zero point 0.5 rupees less. So dollar is weakening, but rupee is strengthening, right? This is how. So again, I am telling you, the answer depends upon the question, right? If it is asking with respect to dollar, then it is depreciating or weakening, while in case of rupee, it is strengthening or appreciating, correct? So now floating exchange rate is basically in case market mechanism. That means in the present scenario, you will find that governments are not intervening in the exchange markets. Foreign exchange markets, governments are not intervening. That means it is only the demand and supply of currencies. So for example, if the demand of dollar increases, that means relatively the demand of dollar will increase, so it will strengthen. Dollar will strengthen. When dollar will strengthen, it simply means that rupee will weaken, right? So it's relative. Secondly, if the demand of dollar is reduced, that means the value of dollar has weakened. And when dollar of value of the dollar has weakened, that simultaneously rupee has strengthened, right? So all this is taking place, right? The appreciation, strengthening, weakening, everything is taking place based upon the market, right? Market is deciding based upon the demand and supply of these currencies, right? So if we talk about the modern world, so in the modern world, most of the world's currencies are floating. That means most of the countries, almost all the countries, exchange rates are defined by market. Countries are not, or the government authorities are not involved in any type of manipulations of these market exchange rates. Then comes fixed exchange rates, pegged float. See, you should be aware of these terms, because these terms, you can find these terms in your questions. Packed float means, for example, if you can recall the times of 1991. So I told you at that time that IMF asked, World Bank asked Government of India to devalue their currency. Now focus my words. In floating exchange rate, I use the term depreciate or appreciate. Here I am using the term devalue, right? Focus on the word. It will be coming in the slides. Here I am using the term devalue. Devalue means the IMF asked the government, IMF to Government of India, and based upon the instructions from the IMF, Government of India weakened their currency, right? That means at that time might be if $1 was equal to, for example, 25 rupees, then they did it to 40 rupees, right? Weakened, right? Rupee was weakened. Now see the difference between these two. This all is taking place on the instructions of the, oh, sorry, on the dynamics of the market dynamics. While this is taking place on the instructions of the government. It is the orders of the government. That means in this regime, the currency of a country is fixed added to another country's currency, a basket of currency. It is fixed by the government, while in this case it is fluctuating. This is called fixed. It is called pegged. That means it is pegged to certain value. So in case of floating, it is the market. In case of fixed or pegged, it is the government of India which has to decide the value of exchange rate. Any query in this? Any query? Are you clear with floating and fixed? Devaluation, okay, once again. See, I told you one thing that practically try to understand it practically. If you go through the newspapers nowadays, you will find that, for example, today it's 1st of September. 1st September, $1 to rupee is 75. 2nd of September, it might be 74.5. On 3rd of September, it might be 73. And 4th, it might 76, right? So you will find that exchange rate in the first case is changing from 75. It is like 75, 74, 73, and again it's 76, right? It is like this way, right? And so this change in the exchange rate, how it is taking place? My second question is how it is taking place. It is basically taking place on the basis of demand of dollar and rupee in the Indian market, right? For example, I said that if the demand of dollar is increased, right? Demand of dollar is increased, that means dollar will strengthen. See, don't confuse that how it is getting strengthened. It is basically strengthened means, for example, uh, if there is an economy and in that economy, if there are 10 10 scooters, right? If the demand of scooters increases, then for example the scooter was selling at a price of 10,000 rupees. If more people are demanding that scooter, that means the price of the scooter can increase to 15,000. That means strengthening. So in the similar case, apply this concept to the currency. When the currency, the demand of a currency increases, then it gets strengthened. Strengthened means that other currency is required more in number. Other currency gets weakened. So dollar is getting strengthened, then relatively rupee will be weaker. Rupee will be weaker, or vice versa. So if you see this case, on 1st of September, you can purchase a dollar in 75 rupees. In the second case, you can purchase a dollar in 74.5 rupees. That means here you require more money, more rupee, more rupee. Here you require less rupee. That means here your rupee becomes strengthened, right? Now this, and in this case on the fourth day, that means more money was required, more rupee was required, that means your rupee got depreciate. Now, I said that this is taking place on a day-to-day basis. 75, 74.5, 73, 76. How it is taking place on a day-to-day basis? Because it is based upon the demand dynamics. It is based upon the demand dynamics. And this demand dynamics means demand and supply. And this demand dynamics is nothing but market. The market is deciding this rate of foreign exchange. So depending upon the supply of dollar and rupee into the economy, this exchange rate of dollar to rupee or any currency to rupee is being decided. That means who is deciding this exchange rate? That is the market. Market is deciding the exchange rate. That's why it is said to be floating exchange rate, right? In the second case, I told you in 1991, IMF asked India to devalue the currency. Devalue, right? See, one more thing. In this case, I was using the term depreciation, right? Depreciation is nothing but the weakening of the currency. Weakening. Here it is also the value is also the weakening of currency, right? But in this case, weakening of currency is because of the market dynamics. Market dynamics. While this is devaluation of currency, this is also weakening of the currency, but this is devaluation. The term devaluation is used because the currency, the value of the currency is reduced, weakened by the authority, by the government of India. While in this case, there was no role of government of India. It is the market which is deciding the currency. So if you see in the present scenario, markets, the governments are not intervening in deciding of the decisive factor in the exchange rates, right? All these on a day-to-day basis, these are being decided by the market. While in this case, fixed exchange rate case, it was the government of India, which on the instructions of the IMF devalued, right? It is also weakened, but it is a term used for the intervention of the government of India. So when government of India is intervening and the amount and the value is reduced, then it is devaluation, right? So if the government is intervening to reduce or increase the value of your currency, then it is fixed exchange. Fixed, that means government will come to fix, right? You can learn it like that. Government is there to fix, government is there to peg, right? So if the government is intervening to fix the exchange rate, it can be appreciation or depreciation, right? Sorry, devaluation or revaluation. They can weaken or strengthen their currency depending upon the situation. That is called fixed exchange rate. It is clear now. Let me know. Pranati and Bhaskar, is it clear or not? Clear. Anybody who is not clear? So broadly, what you have to understand that nowadays, now come to the practical scenario. Nowadays, it is the market. It is not the government. Keep it in mind. In the modern days or nowadays, it is the market which is deciding the exchange rate. And in situations like uh, emergency situations, extraordinary situation that took place in 1991, in such situations, the government are taking the decisions regarding the exchange rate. And such situation means such regimes are said to be fixed exchange rates or pegged float. That's it. Now, third is managed or dirty float or flexible. This is basically the middle path. Middle path means between floating and flexible. Oh, sorry, fixed. Floating and fixed. It is having certain characteristics of the floating and certain of the fixed. What are these? Normally, it is the normal characteristics are of the floating, normal times. That means it is the market. Normally, it is the market, right? It is the market in the normal times. But in case of exceptional times, if things are going out of control, then government can intervene, right? So this is basically flexible. Any example of flexible exchange rate? Any example of flexible exchange rate? Anyone? Any example of flexible exchange rate? Any scheme? I have discussed commodity market. Mm, explain any scheme, particular scheme, because I told you, it's not a normal phenomenon. The governments are not coming to the rescue every time. The governments or RBI is coming only in the eventualities. So any scheme I have discussed with you, or if you are not aware of India, any example from the world, a particular country is always um complained of that they are tinkering with their currencies. Very good. Why IMF is accepting it? Mm, that is nothing but uh, that is different story. We'll discuss it in IMF. It's related to IMF reforms. Why IMF is accepting it? Any example from India? What was market stabilization scheme? If I'm not wrong, I discussed that it was basically brought in a road tap. What is this? RODTEP? When I discuss market stabilization scheme, India instead of MEIS. Okay. When I discuss market stabilization scheme, I told you that it was in the exceptional times when there are huge inflow of the currency, in huge inflow of dollars or foreign currency in India. At that time, government of India in association with the Reserve Bank of India came up with a scheme of market stabilization scheme, and that scheme was nothing but to absorb the extra dollars inflow in the market. What it led to, when there was huge inflow of the dollars, that simply means the dollar, the rupee was appreciating at that time, right? And to check that appreciation, government of India or RBI started removing the dollars from the market. That means the dollars become lesser, right? That means then only rupee became stable. Right. So I told you that it was not normal because government normally didn't intervene. At that time, government intervened. Right. So it was basically market stabilization scheme was an example of this, your managed or dirty float. Right. So managed or dirty float is governments are exceptionally intervening, not intervening on a day-to-day basis, exceptionally. When the things are going out of control, it's having a challenge to the economy and the, but government of China, Chinese government are manipulating, they are being, they are being, it is being argued that Chinese government is intervening or drinking with the currency, or they are devaluing their currency just to increase the exports. Right. Now comes effective exchange rate. Exchange rate we were referring to, it was basically about exchange rate with respect to a particular currency. That is, we were discussing €1, $1 is equals to rupee, €1 is equals to rupee. Now, if we want to calculate the exchange rate with respect to a basket of currency, basket, right? Basket is basically at this basket is decided based upon the your trade, right? This basket is decided based upon the trade. That is, it comprises of Chinese currency, Hong Kong dollar, euro, yen, UK pound, and US dollar, right? Now, if you are making a basket out of this, and then you are comparing 1 rupee is equals to this basket, right? Then it is giving you a glimpse of your trade, right? Because this basket is nothing but your uh, trade basket of currency, right? This is trade basket of your currency. So it is telling the relative strength of a currency related to a basket of other currencies, right? And it is basically telling you, because that exchange rate was particularly telling you with respect to the country. This EER is telling you with respect to the international competitiveness, because here you are referring to trade, right? Here you are referring to trade, first thing. Then if there are two terms, near and rear, they're very much, you might have heard about the terms. Nominal effective exchange rate. Near is nothing but this is EER. This is nothing but EER, right? It is effective exchange rate, nothing, right? This is basically unadjusted weighted average value of a country's currency relative to all other major currencies being traded within an index or pool of currencies. Weights are determined by the importance a home country places on all other currencies traded within the pool as measured by the balance of trade. Need focuses on the exchange of basket of currency, right? It is clear. Near is nothing but it is technically ear, technically is near, right? Yani if you are calculating the exchange rate with the particular basket of currencies with which you are carrying out the trade, then it is near, first thing. Then there is another term, that is real, real effective exchange rate. This is similar to near, this is similar to near, but you are taking into account the effects of inflation. So near is without inflation, and rear is, that means you are taking into account the effects of the inflation, right? Weights are again determined based upon the relative trade balances, right? Reserve Bank of India is compiling rear indices, and REAR is publishing two indices. First one is based upon 6 country state-based weights as discussed in NEAR. And the second one is 36 currencies export and trade-based weights, right? This is not for importance, but you have to understand that how the basket is decided, and that is decided based upon the trade with the country. The indices are also a better reflection of the position of a currency in comparison with the countries in which India has large export and trade interests. That's it. The base is taken as 100 and currently the base year is 2004-5. Now see, rear is equals to near, this is rear, right? And appreciation of the currency and vice versa, that is inflation, right? Now see the interpretation of this in this. Rear focuses on the exchange of goods and services, it is clear. Increase in exchange rate means inflation is increasing. That means if rear is increasing, so rear was near into inflation. So if rear is increasing, that means in India, this is constant, this inflation is increasing. If this inflation is increasing, that means either the rupee is depreciating, right, in inflationary terms, or that particular goods are getting costlier because of the inflation, right? Because of the inflation, particular goods in your country are getting costlier. That's why, what does it mean? That means those goods are available at cheaper prices abroad. Read is telling you the inflation part, tier into inflation. So if read is increasing, that means inflation is increasing. When inflation is increasing, that simply means that the goods in your country are getting costlier. When the goods in your country are getting costlier, that simply means the people are motivated to import goods from abroad. This is a simple meaning of this. REIR is calculated in such a way that an increase in its value signifies appreciation of the rupee, right? Appreciation of the rupee. That means inflation is, if a country real exchange rate is rising, it means its goods are becoming more expensive. Its goods are becoming more expensive related to its competitors. An increase in the real exchange rate means people in a country can get more foreign goods for an equivalent amount of domestic goods. Therefore, an increase in the real exchange rate will tend to increase net imports. This can cause a widening of the current account deficit. Similarly, a fall in the real exchange rate should increase net export as domestic goods are more competitive. Simply, REIR is telling you the inflation. Higher the REIR, higher the inflation. Higher the inflation, that means your currency are getting, your goods are getting costlier in comparison to the external world, right? This is how it works. See, this appreciation here means uh, the value of increasing in the sense of this inflation, right? This is in terms of inflation. Don't get confused. This is in terms of inflation. Any query about REIR and NEIR? Right. I think it is clear. REIR and NEIR. Simply you have to apply REIR because now it creates confusion. Simply you have to keep it in mind that REIR is equals to NEIR into inflation. And more the NEIR, that means NEIR is constant. It is telling you about the inflationary trend in the country. When there is more REIR, that means more inflation. More inflation means that means you are motivated to purchase external things because your things are getting costlier. That means it is leading to more imports. More imports means more CAD, right? So such questions are definitely asked. So be aware about this, right? Work on it. Then read this is done. Hmm. Then comes next concept of dollarization. I think I have discussed it. Um, Dollarization is nothing but when the country's residents or a country start using another currency in parallel to or instead of the domestic currency. Okay. Now, one thing you might be aware that dollarization does not mean the use of US dollar. Keep it in your mind that it is not the US dollar only. It can be any foreign currency, right? And the best example of it is Zimbabwe in the recent past, where the value of Zimbabwean dollar has collapsed. So if you see this cartoon, I have come to pay for my batteries. The price has just gone to two wheel barrows. Okay. See, EER is nothing but NEER. First thing you should be clear. Wait. This is the space. Now see, we started with exchange rate, that is ER, R, okay, ER exchange rate. Exchange rate was nothing but $1 to rupee. Then I said effective exchange rate EER. I said that your rupee to basket of currency, right? Basket of currency. And this basket is decided by your trade partners. Then comes NEER. NEER is nothing but EER. NEER is nothing but EER. It is a technique, more refined name of EER. EER is a generalized term. That means you have to compare the exchange rate of your currency with respect to a basket of currency. This is a generalized term, right? Now, near means you're comparing your rupee with a basket of currency of those countries with which you are trading, right? It was a generalized term. Ear was a generalized term. Near is basket of currency of those countries with which you are trading countries. Here ear can be with any of the country. That basket, you can form a basket with 10 countries. You can have a basket of 12 countries. It is generalized, right? Effective exchange rate means that you are comparing the exchange rate with your basket of currency, and that basket of currency is not defined. In case of NEER, this basket of currency is defined in terms of trading countries. This basket of currency includes the currency of those countries with whom you are trading the most. And in the Indian case, it is the basket of 6 countries, right? Then I said REER. REER is nothing but it is telling you about the inflation. If you see REER, that is near into inflation, right? Now, if for example, if anybody is saying that near is 1 and then say REER is equals to also 1, then it simply means that inflation is not there, right? Now, if anybody says REER becomes 1.5, then inflation is basically 50%. That means if NEER is 1 and REER is 1.5, that means there is inflationary trend of 50%. That means your economy is inflationary because, see, now try to understand this. This NEER and REER are telling you about the exchange rate in the exchange rate market, right? They are telling you exchange rate in the exchange market, right? It is not telling you about this inflation, is telling you about the economy. This NEER is telling you about the exchange rate market, because this is, you are calculating the value of NEER and REER in the value of NEER in the exchange rate market, right? Right. I think it's clear now. Don't worry, I'll complete it. So that means if there is change in the value of need and read, that means what is the other component in this equation? That is inflation. If read is more than need, that simply means that there is inflationary trend in the economy. And that's why again that in that concept comes, that inflationary trend, that means you are importing more things rather than taking your own goods, right? So this is all about your this need and read. Okay, we'll complete this devaluation and appreciation. Devaluation and depreciation both means weakening. Both means weakening. Devaluation means the action of the government, deliberate action of the government. The best example to understand is 1991 situation. Depreciation is again weakening of your currency, right? But the action is by the market factors. It is the market which is deciding the weakening of the currency. In this case, it was the government of India. In this case, it is the market. So if you see in a day-to-day basis, the value of currency is increasing or decreasing, it is basically the market. While in this case, the value of rupee was depreciated from 20 to 40, right? Then it was basically devalue, right? It takes place in the pegged fixed exchange rate. You should know that it will only take place in the pegged or fixed exchange rate system, right? While it will take place in the floating exchange rate regime. The opposite of depreciation is sorry, appreciation. This is appreciation. Appreciation. The devaluation and depreciation similar in the sense of their after effects. They only differ in the sense of how value of currency is falling. If it is through market, then it is depreciation, and if it is by the government order, then devaluation. Is it clear or not? These are very important concepts. UPSC usually asks these things. So anybody who is not clear with this? Right. So it's all for today. So broadly, what we have understood, exchange rate, different. See, the best way to understand is always whenever you are talking or trying to understand the exchange rate regime, always keep in your mind the 1991. The best thing is, I'd always understand it with that in 1991 we devalued the currency. That's it, right? And that was because of the government's intervention. Try to recall the story. IMF ordered government of India. Government of India followed the orders, right? And then they devalued the currency. But and opposite is the market dynamics. So always, whenever you are trying to understand devalue part, always correlate it with the 1991 reforms. That's it. You'll never forget. So ideally, in the present times, mostly the governments are following that flexible, right? That is very clear. So it's all for today. I'll share it. I'll continue with this tomorrow, right? So, and for me, it appears that you people are doing the questions and you are trying to, because after the feedback I'm getting from you people while I'm asking the questions, that's very good. Again, I'm telling you, please, if you are not having the, if you are not finding questions on particular topics, because there might be 2 or 3 questions on a particular topic. So better to download any test series of that particular topic and try to solve the questions so that you can have the different dimensions of that particular topic, right? So thank you very much. We'll continue tomorrow.